Welcome to everyone who has tuned into our webinar today. The webinar will be looking forward to the practice of project management in the digital age. Our speaker today is Dr. Dimitris Antoniadis, who has worked across several major projects in the UK. Now, as a lecturer, he is known for his excellent support and ability of transferring his work experience to his teaching. My name is Vivian Walters. I belong to the committee of the FAPM Program Management Interest Group and your host for today. I'll hand you over now to Dr. Dimitris. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, for inviting me to talk about this very interesting subject, which really focuses on the future and what we need to be ready for. From my side, I know Vivian said I'm a lecturer. I did part-time lecturing, but basically I worked in various senior management roles for a number of utility and construction and ex-construction organizations like Carillion. And I've been a program manager, head of PMO, and now since last year, I work as a consultant for my own and consultancy, which is called Pro Global. I have 30 years of experience in program and project management. And last year, I authored the book Demystifying Project Control. For my sins, and because I didn't know what to do at night or early hours of the morning, I did part-time master's and then a part-time PhD. Which was completed about 9 years ago. I am a fellow of the association and also a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. In terms of today's presentation, as I said, I'm looking in the future, and as part of my little bit on continuous improvement, I work on and collaborate with two other groups that deal with blockchain in construction. One is under the University of UCL, called CBC, and another one is a separate one that is headed by a research group by the company Nomitech. And as individuals, we are all participating from major IT and construction organizations, and we're putting our heads together to see how blockchain can help improve the delivery of projects. So we are in the current environment, program and project management requires improved complex data transaction, and it requires openness, transparency, trust, and irreversibility. We have, and most of you probably have worked on partnering or alliancing environment where we are trying to be less confrontational, improve cooperation, and these at this point in time can be done to a certain level, but they need a lot more. So today, and blockchain technology, as I will explain later on, it provides a number of improvements to the transport and security and transparency and irreversibility of data that will definitely help program and project management as in the future, and as you'll see in my slides. So today's presentation, we will look at a case study in terms of what I've participated in the past, and we did something major with a utilities organization. So I'll take you through that and some numbers. Then we'll look at the challenges that we faced. Then what is blockchain? So I can all bring you to the sort of a level that you can understand then why blockchain can help us as program managers or project managers. What are the main drivers behind the technology, and then we will go back to the case study and see and the asset management cycle and see what can be delivered via blockchain, and then the blockchain technology itself. So if we look at the case study, I'm talking about a major utilities organization that's in the electricity, covering 3 regions. And the challenges obviously was the external environment and the requirements for regulation, outputs, the customers, preparation for an 8-year investment plan that Ofgem sort of set a target to all regulatory authorities, distribution networks, etc., from 2015 to 2023. Major task for all the utilities in the sector. Then the internal environment, and we are talking about, you know, the governance, inter and intra-directorate governance, the inter-directorate environment and relationships. We had 9 program managers, and people are different, and as you can understand, different needs, different compliances to requirements from the processes. All this had to be faced. Then individual project requirements, and obviously the project teams. We were looking at embarking into, and embarked, obviously the company is currently now into partnering environment with 4 organizations, and as you can understand, bigger challenges with 5 parties working together. Then obviously tier 2 and tier 3 contractors, including suppliers. And obviously the interconnections, as I said earlier, between the 5 organizations, and that means not just systems, but everything else that was involved in the case study I'm talking about. Some numbers, so that you can get a grasp of the challenge that we were facing. On the regulated side, we had about every year about 400 projects, with about almost 50% of those less than 500K, and with a handful of those more than 10 million. So as you can imagine, the challenge for 220 of the projects were in between, nothing major, but everything had to deliver an output. Then we obviously delivering non-regulated work, and sort of similar level of challenges there in terms of the number of projects, the scale of the budgets, and sort of similar durations between 1.5 years and 2 years. So you can see what the 9 program managers challenge they had in their hands, as well as the 4 partners that were involved in delivering the program of works. So we are talking about a collaborative environment, because partnering means 5 organizations working together. So we're looking at a socio-organizational system, that the systems that come together to deliver various parties' long-term strategic objectives. Yes, we all know what partnering means, through a number of programs of work, and at the same time serve their own purpose of existence. So we have hidden interconnections and between the systems, and as you can imagine, you need to consider all 5 systems, not just the client side, but all the other parties that are coming together, and therefore use that to form a collaborative environment. So overall, and as we know from those of you that heard about projecting the future, and the environment, the project environment are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So the SORDIS, VUCA, and we, sort of the APM, we aim to address that through initiatives such as projecting the future. And part of projecting a future is looking into how software tools and technology can support the improved delivery. And just the slide out of the latest report, August 19, from projecting the future, and you can see some of the challenging numbers we have. And you know, it's artificial intelligence could add as much as 654 billion to the UK economy by 2035, so in 16 years. The other interesting number is 35% of current UK jobs could be at high risk of disruption from automation. And I'll come back to this point at the end with something that was announced by the Office of National Statistics, for National Statistics, regarding project practitioners. So we have a challenge, and we need to see how the technology will support us to improve the delivery of programs. And a part of the technology, obviously, is blockchain. So the challenges in the case study were obviously significant efficiency and innovation requirements as part of the regulatory needs, quality of service, difficult competitive landscape, and a massive or a considerable skills shortage. So with that background, the company decided to embark on a business transformation program, changing processes and systems to enable collaborative working, geographical program of works, diversity, and varying work practices within the company and the partners. Because let's not forget that the transformation program was looking inwards, but also how we improve that link between us as the client and the four partners delivering the projects and parts of the program of work. So in terms of blockchain, basically blockchains are a network of nodes or blocks that communicate between them securely, allow for transaction of data, and ensure that parties in the chain are synchronized and hold or see the same data. It started almost a decade ago by those of you that know Bitcoin and some other things that basically transferring digital money over the internet outside of financial institutions, and by that I mean banks, but now lately has expanded to include other type of data. And for those of you that looked at your car insurance or home insurance, you can see a very long string of digits attached to a letter probably you received. That is part of a blockchain that these organizations are trying to use now to improve their delivery of services. So it is a secure, trustworthy, transparent, and irreversible way of transmitting data over the internet. And this is really what we as project practitioners should be looking at and see how we can explore further what can be done with blockchain. And I will take you through in the next slides later on what are we doing in one of the groups in terms of piloting that. So staying in a bit with the blockchain. So we're talking about individual blocks that contain data that are, as they enter the system, they are time and date stamped. So they're placed in a sequence. And as you can see in my slide, you have the chain, and each block contains that data. So as soon as the data is entered, it gets cryptography ensure that every block or data cannot be copied, or other data can be inserted and break the history of change. And you can all imagine what that means for a project. So blocks or data have their own unique signature. So you can imagine a drawing, a progress report, and I'm talking about the future, has its own signature, and it belongs to a chain, be that the report chain, be that the date design chain, and the number of designs we have. So each block then validates independently all other blocks within the blockchain. So, and when it's stored, it creates a ledger. And this is a sort of financial sort of language, but block of data. It gets it, as I said, a date stamp and a time stamp, so it's called a ledger. So you can hear if you read about it, you can hear blockchain being referred to as a distributed ledger technology, or DLT. So the blockchain is completely transparent and gives the full history of the data users are working with. And it cannot be tampered with. Anybody that tries to tamper with cannot change the history of that block. And therefore, you get that trust of the information that is transferred between the parties. So what are the benefits? And obviously, I'll take you through who are the initiative drivers, as I called it. The benefits are that there are common standards that need to be used. It automates the workflow. It's adopting good practice throughout the program delivery, and we can see why in a minute. Using of common data environment and therefore enabling BIM. We all know why has been stalled, and common data environment is one of the issues that needs to be resolved. Using smart contracts. I know of an organization that are already using artificial intelligence to do big comparison between contracts and therefore minimizing that additional external input that is needed on reviewing contracts. It does drive, blockchain drives operational efficiencies. It is removing intermediaries, reducing the administrating effort, and obviously reconciliation of transactions. And we all know how many transactions we have through our projects. So organizations such as Tata Steel, and I'll tell you later on why I've got to have a copy of that, are looking into using blockchain because there are a number of things, as you can see in the middle of the slide, that they need to know who the suppliers are, what is the fabrication specification, what is the design and construction specification, what are the transportation details, what is the carbon footprint. Tata Steel is looking at using blockchain to capture all this information, and therefore they will know, as the person that has joined the group tells us, they will know exactly where each steel beam is located, where it came from, and all the required detail that they need to know as an organization. And this will be a massive benefit for them. So looking at then the case study, so I can bring you back a bit to what has happened in the major transformation in the utilities organization. We had to look at all the process and software systems. So today we'll review these as part of the standards that should be implemented almost on every programs, yeah, as well as we'll look at the blockchain prerequisites. So we all know and understand the asset management cycle, or the program and project delivery. We have the gates, the governance gates, and we have processes like the client or the asset management directorate has the future needs identified in a program of works, be that 5 or 8 years, working its way through the definition of each program, then with support from other directorates, identifying the procurement strategy, commercial strategy, going down to risk and value management, all the project management processes that need to happen, looking at improving the management of information and robust reporting, up to the handover and lessons learned, and then closing the asset management cycle by sending it back to either the network operations or our asset management colleagues to look at it again in the future for maintenance and everything else. So we looked at the cycle, and we found out where we could improve the process, including the governance gates. So in terms of the systems, we basically used two major software packages, SAP, to carry out portfolio management, finance, supply chain, and everything else. So set up the portfolio. Then using Oracle tools to do the program and project management, And because the plan was also, before I left, was to embark to go into BIM, to use ProjectWise to do the design and document management. And that then was looking at setting up the links between portfolio management, SAP, and program and project management, the Oracle tools. And we set up the interfaces so that capital program can talk to asset management, and asset management can talk to the capital program via the electronic links of the two software tools. So transfer of information by structuring the data. I'll come back to the structuring data in the next slide. So in terms of the program and project management system, as I said, we're using Primavera. Obviously, every project had the project management or project execution plan. We set up the project control handbook via the PMO. And we linked, again, with soft links, Primavera with Unifier, the tool that does cost and contract management. So all the partners were to have the budgets on P6 and then transfer these to Unifier to monitor then the actual costs as they were coming in. And also the package has a contract management capability and some others, but we were not using these as much. The third package that we're using, it's the estimating Cost OS or Costos, and that also had soft links with Primavera. All that was happening through the standard codes that you see in pink. So we'd link the WBS, the CBS, and the OBS and RBS, basically using the first two, WBS, to link upstream to SAP, and the CBS to link with a Unifier. So a major challenge, because you needed to bring all the codes at the same level of standard. Something else that you see in blue writing in there, and again looking at moving into BIM, the reason also we had gone for Costos was because he had capability to link to 3D drawings, and therefore establish at the very early stage a greater estimate and improve the estimating facility. So in terms of structures, and this is, I want to draw your attention that because we did spend a lot of time, we had to see the whole portfolio and the whole thing, everything that the company is doing as part of the asset hierarchy. So identifying the asset type, which directorate delivers that, then the program areas, and therefore, and below that, regional plans at level 5, and then at level 6, the project. All these was coded and standardized. Then downstream, then for each project, we standardized the work breakdown structure and all the structures, as I said earlier on. So you can imagine now a long string of characters that rolls up from project using the WBS to regional plan, to program managers, to programs areas, and then directorate and asset type. And I can tell you there that that long string of characters included what the company was doing in terms of monitoring for maintenance reasons, monitoring the assets, included what we called functional locations, or FLOCs. So for every design that our colleagues, the designers, were doing, they had to allocate and indicate where is the assets located, and obviously in the drawing put that particular character, that set of characters. So the string of characters becomes even longer. But it was crucial because all that information had to roll up not just to the asset management plan, but also to other directorates like strategy, where they needed to see what is happening, and then obviously network operations, who needed to see where are the assets in terms of the maintenance plan. So basically common structures, and as you can see, that is the biggest, most important part in the blockchain area in terms of projects. So coming back to blockchain, structuring the data and rolling this up from project to program and portfolio enables an efficient delivery, and obviously transfer of data is more structured. However, it is not as efficient, as effective as that of the blockchain. And additionally, as in many cases, for those of you that have been through transformation, you probably found out, like we did find out, and in my previous lives as well with other organizations, it introduces an increased level of administrative tasks. And that's a challenge, which it needs to be, in every transformation program, it needs to be identified and then it needs to be addressed. So in the group, in one of the groups that I'm working for, we looked at, as I said earlier, at the pilot. And for those of you that, like myself, don't like linear things, I accept my apologies, but we had to present a slide to one of the major IT organizations, as we had to place it in a linear format. But you all know that, you know, project starts from a briefing, moves to concept, definition, design, delivery, and then facility management. So in terms of the pilot, we identified the parties. And I mentioned earlier that one of the parties, the steel supplier, as you can see there on note 3, which is Tata Steel, that would participate in the pilot. SAP is the other one as a major IT utility. And I forgot to say earlier that in that group, we have major construction players. We have HS2 participating, Costain, Tarmac, Wilmot Dixon's, Highways England, IBM, SAP, and we're all pulling together and trying to illustrate the proof of concept of how the pilot process will flow. So you see on the arrows, you see who participates. So on node 1, which is the client, participates in the project definition. The professional services, that is project management, design, the design team, and others within the team participate in the digital model of the airport, in that particular case, which is our pilot. And I forgot to say, the design organization in this case that also participate in the pilot is Arabs. Then you see on design evaluation, you get the client and the design team working together. If I move 2 arrows further down, the manufacturer, the steel manufacturer. So our pilot would pick up an airport steel team. The client needs an airport lounge, designed by Arab. The steel is supplied by Tata Steel. Then the contractor, we identify the contractor is working with us. So you can see how the parties are coming together and how they contribute in the proof of concept. Below that, we are also trying with the organization I mentioned earlier to look at how smart contracts will work. And at the bottom, then you see the blocks of information that will create the blockchain, or I should say, the large number of blockchains that will be created within a project. And these blockchains will store the key project status with timestamps, the involved parties and task descriptions, providing transparency and adherence to project contracts via smart contracts. Just to take you a level below that, what we designed is the swim lane process flow, and you can see there where I described, you know, who is involved from the project side. So the client and the client team set up the design contract. We need to start from something, and obviously the client, having decided on the concept, give the design organization the contract to kick off. Then the budget is agreed, and all the parties that work together participating in the blockchain should be identified every single step that the major parties to the pilot will contribute in. So, and we had to go to that level because we needed to identify, using the standard structures, who does what, Yes, and what will the blockchain include? So in terms of what we need to consider is what has changed to make people use the technology. In isolation, blockchain will have no impact. Yes, it is an automated workflow. The transparency derived from the blockchain and the legal smart contracts embodied in the blockchain will be the catalyst for change. But we need more than that. Yes, we need all the designs which now have to be digitally stored in the cloud to be there to prevent loss of crucial documents. And therefore, what we're saying by that is BIM level 2 will be established. It's already done out there. We need a central mandate, but needs something to enforce adherence to the processes and contracts, which is much higher and a much bigger challenge, and obviously it doesn't exist at the moment. It is a global target. For those of you that through LinkedIn looked at the World Economic Forum, they are focusing now on a number of different industries on blockchain. And obviously, supply chains on big projects are now international. Therefore, let's take, for example, Tata Steel. They don't produce all the steel here. They take everything from a different source. So that then makes the challenge bigger. But technology can help on that. The requirements, we need to consider the whole picture early and the holistic system view. We have to understand the standard project management structures, which are known to project practitioners, but they need to be followed. Understand how the structures interface, and in many cases, how to interlink this. And especially I'm talking about the work breakdown structure and the cost breakdown structure. And there is a way that these can be linked. Then we need to accept that the project delivers an asset and therefore belongs to hierarchy. We cannot have, if it's a contractor organization, even if they use blockchain to do that internally, it will be a massive challenge because the other parties will not be participating. So we need to standardize the project management structures, and that's how I link it back to the case study, right? Which we've done, and it is possible. Standardization of positioning of the structures in a standard ledger. Don't forget, as I said, there is a massive string of characters that need to be included. And the positioning of that needs to be standardized throughout. And you can imagine now, what's the challenge for a country? And then what is the challenge even going internationally into where do you position the characters and what do they represent? We need to use common data environment that, in addition to digital drawings, will also hold project documentation in a standard structure. Yes? And obviously, digitization of drawings and therefore BIM. That is a requirement, and it's a massive one, actually. So accept that we need to accept that as project practitioners, we need to accept that other functions need to receive accurate data. And we cannot have this, I'll check the data that someone else is checking, that someone else has checked, and therefore putting a massive administrative burden on the project. We need to eliminate gray IT. And I think you all understand what I mean by gray IT. These spreadsheets that float around cannot happen anymore. Data needs to be structured in a tool. We need obviously to manage behaviors and change. Yes, we cannot build trust also by just drafting a relationship plan and then having a couple of workshops. And that can come with through blockchain. So where in program management blockchain can aim to contribute? Common data and structures and therefore standards. He makes the outputs that projects and programs have reported a lot easier. Smart contracts, be that on the commercial process side or procurement and supply chain. Asset management, because they'll be able to digitize the assets and therefore improving the management of the asset at the end of the project life cycle. Monitoring and control processes, making them smoother and the data transfer much easier. Design management, I mentioned a number of times, BIM, and reporting. You can imagine what and how more improved the reporting will be, especially with not using gray IT. So in terms of the drivers, last year, July, the government issued the construction sector deal policy paper. It's a very interesting paper. Andrew Wassenholm, I think, is leading the group. Some of the policy aims are a 33% reduction in the cost of construction and the whole life cost cycle. And then a 50% reduction in the time taken from inception to completion of new build. As you can see, this straight away points into using digital techniques, and these to be rolled out on all phases, not just at the beginning or at the end or just for one organization. And McKinsey, at the same time with the government, right, issued a report last year, which they see that the need is to drive operational efficiencies, removing intermediaries or administrative effort, record keeping, and transaction reconciliation. So there is a massive drive from the government side, as I said earlier, from big organizations. I mentioned some of the names that participate in our group earlier on. I know that I mentioned LinkedIn earlier on, that there is a big insurance company somewhere in the southeast. I can't remember now, where is it, Singapore or somewhere, where they are using blockchain for everything that they are doing. And again, trying to remove intermediaries and minimize the administrative burden that obviously is throughout all the industries, not just program management, and obviously record keeping. And I think with that, and with 5 minutes to spare, I wanted to thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. A lot of the stuff that I said in terms of standardizing structures and how we interface them are in the book. But I can always, if you want, get in touch and explain to you more. What we're doing in the groups, basically, either UCL or the what we call CSCC. And I can give you information if you want to participate. So basically, I mentioned earlier that I'll say what the Office for National Statistics said when they did an analysis about the project profession and blockchain. They found out that the roles with the lowest risk of automation include those associated with the management, planning, and advisory skills. So that could mean project professionals are amongst the occupational groups least likely to see their jobs put at risk by automation. However, we cannot forget that automation brings change, and as program managers and program managers, process practitioners, we need to embrace technology as it comes and use it. We cannot just stand on what one report said or another. And with that note, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please, and I'll attempt to answer them.
I'll begin the first question. So someone says, I understand the concept of blockchain, but have real problem visualizing it. So I have a couple of sort of questions. How much, he's got a couple of questions on that. One of them is, how much data does each node hold? And what systems can be used to update the blockchain?
Okay, how much data? For that, as long as there is a unique code against the data that you want, let's assume that it's a drawing or a report. Let's say it's the monthly report. That monthly report or that drawing will have a unique identifier. that will belong into a common data environment as is placed by the designer, let's say the draftsman that puts it up, and then to send it for approval. So the amount of data, it doesn't matter. The issue that exists is the speed, and we know that in the group, and we need to address it, because that concerns the next part of the question, because we are working with a couple of IT software people that can tell us what happens with the amount of data and how will that affect the speed of transfer of information. It's not all easy, and that's why we're doing the pilot. We need to identify how an Arab's drawing about the whole of the roof can be picked up by the blockchain. And as I said, the unique identifier is almost the easier thing, easier said than done though. But then how is that transferred, and the speed that will be transferred to Tata after it has been approved with the contract. So there is a lot more thinking that we are doing in the working group, and I don't have all the answers.
Another question: if all designs have to be stored in the cloud, how do you protect the IP and the design data from espionage? Of all the design data, he said, I don't know, I suppose it has to be stored in the cloud. How do you protect the IP and the design data from espionage?
Okay, as I said, one of the, and I'll try and go back. You can imagine that one of the blocks right there on the left-hand side is the design data. It's secure. It cannot be broken. Nobody can break into that, because that particular design has that very long character. It takes cryptography. Is there on the second sentence on the green box? Cryptography ensures that the block of data cannot be copied or tampered with. Yes, therefore, the IP is protected because only the parties that are allowed to access the cloud for approval or for uploading data have access to the cloud, but they cannot remove or tamper with the data within that particular block. Anybody that tries to do anything on the data will change the history, and therefore, as I said, it will render the chain problematic, and anybody can pick up who tried to do that. So it's massively, as I said earlier, I think in the earlier slide, it transfers digital money completely safely through the network. You know, Bitcoin works like that, and it's transparent, it's irreversible, yeah, and it cannot be tampered with.
The next question I've got is, will the speed of 5G speed up the process of the blockchain usage?
I wish I had the answer. I am not an IT person. I am, as I said, I am a project professional. It's a good question. If it improves the speed of the internet, as I said, one of the problems blockchain has is the speed of the internet. If it improves the speed of the internet, then yes. But as I said, again, in the working group, we are talking to IT companies that can address this problem. And actually, I can ask this question in our next meeting. But yeah, it depends when 5G will be up and running. But the issue that we have is the other points that I mentioned there in terms of, you know, standardizing the data. Go back to the asset. Standardizing that block of data that starts from the lowest level of breakdown structure, rolling it up, and each set of characters needs to be allocated to a position, and that's a challenge. Yeah, Vivian, any other?
Yeah. Another question: how do you think blockchain technology should be implemented in integrating data from various sources across the life cycle of the project? And who will manage the data which is being generated? Okay,
this question, I think, is answered by this diagram. This diagram shows how each node or each party, let's consider it as a party, right? Who manages the data that are within the arrows, as I said, and then below that you can see on the squares, you know, the blockchain, the client addresses. We haven't come up with the details. because you can see that there, right? That the client addresses block 2, block 5, 6, and so on. The designer or the project team addresses the digital model. As I said, in the pilot, we're looking at Arabs and how they're going to work around that, the digital model of the airport. So we have identified the parties and who is managing them. Now, I said earlier, very quickly passing through that, there is a number of chains of blockchains below each one. Because if you can imagine, right, and I know we took a big challenge with the airport. You can imagine how many drawings an airport has, or how many drawings a simple project has. All these have got a number of disciplines. Yeah, if I go back the other way, yeah, you can see that there are a number of, on the left-hand side, you can see that there are a number of disciplines, there are a number of suppliers that contribute to a project. All these will be allocated a code, be that from part of the WBS or the cost account that needs to be considered. Yeah. So then as they come in to approve or upload data, that's how then each party is identified. And as I said, in the pilot that we're working with, you can see who did we identify that needs to contribute to the blockchain. Yeah.
I think one more question.
Yes.
What is the time scale for rolling out blockchain into every?
Personally, I wish I could roll it out tomorrow. But let me ask a different question that I think you will know, all of you will know the answer. In how many projects that you're working with, yeah, within a company or within a program, you have all agreed that the WBS is of a certain standard structure, yeah? Or to put it another question, the cost breakdown structure. How many people are using them, right? These are questions that I've come up across. I came across people that, senior, various, not in the previous organization, right? I have to make that clear. They said, oh, no, I cannot be bothered with a project management plan. I've been saying all that all these years, but nobody does it. So how quickly it can be implemented? It needs a lot of drive, and hopefully there is a target. The construction sector deal has set targets. Andrew Wasselholm, as the chair, has set up targets for the delivery of these. So personally, obviously, I will know a lot more when we do the pilot and see what are the challenges. But it needs a bigger drive. It needs a number of parties to come together. I sort of standardized with working with the guys, Arabs and others. I've standardized a generic WBS that links to the international ICMS, International Cost Management System codes. So just doing that, it requires an effort. So can it be implemented? I hope that in the next 5 years, and together with that initiative, and obviously with projecting the future, we can speed up the process.
We're running out of time now, so I'll say thank you for today's webinar. I'll just finish off with a few announcements concerning the program management SIG.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you all for, you have my details. You can see my email there, or drop me a note via LinkedIn. If you have any more questions, or as I said, if you want to work with us in the CSEC group about blockchain.
Just a few announcements. 3 announcements with regards to what the APM Program Management SIG is doing at the moment. We have our conference coming up next year in mid-March 2020. After the webinar, after a few days, a webinar put up on the APM website. That will sort of give you an opportunity to continue the conversations. I'd also ask you please to look out for the APM Program Management SIG blogs, which appear on a fairly regular basis. So goodbye to you all, and thanks for your attendance.